The night I got thrown out of my mother-in-law's house began with roasted chicken, crystal wine glasses, and a lie that had been growing for 23 years. If someone had told me that morning that by midnight, I would be standing in the rain with a suitcase, abandoned by my husband's entire family, I would have laughed. I was wrong. Terribly wrong. My name is Evelyn Carter, and this is the story of how telling the truth destroyed my life. At least, that's what I thought at the time. The truth was much bigger than I knew. And before that night was over, I would discover that some families will do absolutely anything to protect their secrets, even if it means sacrificing one of their own. Don't wear the blue dress. My husband Daniel stood in the bedroom doorway adjusting his tie. I looked up from my makeup mirror. Why not? He shrugged. My mother hates it. I laughed. Your mother hates everything I wear. Daniel didn't laugh back. That should have been my first warning. For years, I had tried to earn my place in the Montgomery family. Years, but somehow I was always an outsider. Not openly. Not obviously. Just enough to make me feel it. The Montgomerys were one of those wealthy families that looked perfect from the outside. Beautiful house. Successful business. Elegant family dinners. Perfect holiday photographs. But underneath, there were cracks. Lots of them. I just didn't understand how deep they went. Not yet. The dinner was being held at my in-laws' estate. A massive property that looked more like a country club than a family home. Every month, the entire family gathered there. Attendance wasn't optional, especially if my mother-in-law, Patricia Montgomery, was hosting. Patricia believed family loyalty was everything. What she really meant was obedience. The moment Daniel and I walked through the front door, she appeared. Tall, perfectly dressed, perfectly groomed, perfectly terrifying. Her smile never reached her eyes. Daniel, she kissed his cheek. Then she turned to me. Evelyn, no kiss, no hug, just my name, like an unpleasant item on a grocery list. I forced a smile. Good evening, Patricia. Her eyes traveled over my dress. A silent inspection. Disapproval. As usual. Well, she said finally. At least you're not wearing blue. Daniel looked away. That should have been warning number 2. The dining room was already crowded. Brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone talking. Everyone laughing. Everyone pretending. At the head of the table sat my father-in-law, Richard Montgomery, the family patriarch, a respected businessman, a devoted husband, a loving father, or so everyone believed. He smiled when he saw me. Evelyn, his smile lingered slightly too long. My stomach tightened. I hated when he looked at me like that. Not because it was inappropriate, because it felt sad. Lonely, like he was carrying something heavy, something he couldn't tell anyone. I never understood it. Not until later. Dinner began normally. Wine flowed. Stories were shared. The family laughed. But something felt strange. Richard barely spoke. Patricia kept watching him. Not lovingly, not affectionately, more like a prison guard watching an inmate. I noticed because I had become very good at observing people. When you're the outsider in a family, observation becomes survival. Then something happened. A small thing. Tiny, easy to miss. But I saw it. A waiter entered carrying another bottle of wine. Richard looked up. Only for a second. Only briefly. But the expression on his face changed. His entire face softened. The waiter smiled back. Again, only briefly. Then both men looked away. The moment lasted less than 2 seconds. Yet it stayed with me. Why? Because I had seen that look before. Years ago. In someone else's eyes. 10 years earlier, before I met Daniel, my best friend had married a man who was secretly gay. He spent years pretending. Years hiding. Years living a lie because his family wouldn't accept him. I remembered the way he looked at the man he loved. The same look Richard had just given the waiter. The exact same look. A look of longing, recognition, pain, hope. My heart skipped. No, impossible. Richard and Patricia had been married over 40 years. They had 4 children, 7 grandchildren, an entire life together. Yet, something about it wouldn't leave me alone. After dinner, people spread throughout the house. Some moved to the garden. Others gathered in the library. I headed upstairs looking for a bathroom. As I passed a hallway, I heard voices. Quiet voices. Male voices. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I swear I wasn't. But then I heard Richard speak. And I froze. I can't keep doing this. Silence. Then another voice. The waiter. I know. Richard sounded exhausted. I thought it would get easier. It never does. A long pause. Then the waiter spoke again. She still doesn't know. Richard laughed bitterly. No. My pulse quickened. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I should have walked away. A decent person would have. Instead I stayed. Because something in Richard's voice broke my heart. The sound of a man trapped inside his own life. Then I heard him say words that changed everything. I haven't loved my wife in 30 years. The hallway seemed to tilt. My stomach dropped. The waiter said nothing. Richard continued. I tried. God knows I tried. His voice cracked. But I can't change who I am. Silence. Then the waiter whispered. You shouldn't have to. My hand flew to my mouth. Suddenly everything made sense. The loneliness. The sadness. The secret looks. The distance between Richard and Patricia. All of it. Richard wasn't in love with another woman. He was in love with a man. And judging from the conversation, he had been hiding it for decades. I backed away carefully. My heart pounded. I felt like I had discovered a bomb hidden beneath the family mansion. A secret powerful enough to destroy everything. The last thing I wanted was involvement. I intended to forget what I heard. Pretend it never happened. Go home. Move on. That was the plan. Until Patricia cornered me. The family gathered again later that evening for coffee and dessert. Patricia sat like a queen holding court. Everyone listening. Everyone agreeing. Then she turned her attention toward me. Never a good sign. So Evelyn, she said loudly, have you finally decided when you're giving me another grandchild? The room became silent. I felt heat rise into my face. Daniel stared at his coffee. Coward. Patricia knew perfectly well I had suffered 2 miscarriages. Everyone knew. Yet she asked anyway. Publicly. Humiliatingly. I forced a smile. We'll see. Patricia sighed dramatically. At your age, time isn't exactly your friend. Several relatives looked uncomfortable. No one spoke. No one ever challenged Patricia. I swallowed hard. It's a private matter. Patricia smiled. No secrets in this family. The irony made me laugh. No secrets. If only she knew. The attacks continued. Small, cruel, precise. The way only family can be. Every comment designed to wound. Every smile hiding a knife. And then Patricia crossed a line. A line she couldn't uncross. She looked around the room. Some people marry into families and never truly belong. Her eyes locked onto mine. The message was clear. Everyone knew who she meant. 23 people sat there. Nobody defended me. Not even Daniel. Something inside me snapped. Years of humiliation. Years of criticism. Years of silence. All at once. I stood. The room fell silent. Patricia smiled. Victorious. She thought she had won. She had no idea what was coming. If we're talking about secrets, I said slowly, perhaps we should discuss everyone's secrets. The smile vanished from Patricia's face. Richard looked up sharply. My pulse thundered. Part of me wanted to stop. But anger had taken control. Years of anger. Years of pain. Years of being treated like I wasn't good enough. Patricia narrowed her eyes. What exactly do you mean? The room held its breath. I looked at Richard. His face had gone pale. He knew. Somehow, he knew. And in that moment, I realized the terrible mistake I was about to make. But it was already too late. Because everyone was staring, waiting, listening. And the truth was sitting on the tip of my tongue. The truth that would shatter the Montgomery family forever. I opened my mouth and spoke. The moment the words left my lips, Richard's coffee cup slipped from his hand and crashed onto the floor. The entire room gasped. Patricia's face turned white. Daniel stood up. Someone screamed. And suddenly I realized that what I thought was the family's biggest secret was only the beginning. Because the expression on Patricia's face wasn't shock. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't confusion. It was fear. Pure, terrified. Fear, as though she wasn't afraid of the truth coming out. She was afraid of what would come out next. And before midnight I would discover exactly why. The second those words left my mouth, I knew I had changed something forever. I think Richard has spent most of his life hiding who he really is. Silence. Not ordinary silence. The kind of silence that feels alive. The kind that wraps itself around a room and squeezes the air from everyone's lungs. Nobody moved. Nobody blinked. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. Richard stared at me. The color had drained from his face. Patricia's coffee cup trembled in her hand. Daniel looked like he'd been struck by lightning. What did he just say? Patricia whispered. For a moment, I considered taking it back, pretending I hadn't meant it. But years of humiliation had carried me too far. I heard Richard talking tonight. The room erupted. What? You were listening? That's ridiculous. Voices collided from every direction. Patricia suddenly stood. Enough! The room fell silent again. Her eyes locked onto mine. Cold, dangerously cold. You have exactly 10 seconds to explain yourself. I looked at Richard. The poor man looked exhausted. Not angry. Not furious. Just tired. Tired in a way that broke my heart. I turned back toward Patricia. I heard him speaking to someone. Patricia's face hardened. What someone? The waiter. The room exchanged nervous glances. Then I said the sentence that detonated the evening. He said he hadn't loved his wife in 30 years and couldn't change who he was. A collective gasp swept through the room. Someone dropped a spoon. Richard closed his eyes, as though he had spent decades dreading this exact moment. Patricia looked at her husband, then at me, then back at her husband. And suddenly she laughed. Actually laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. It was sharp, broken, almost desperate. You foolish woman. The words stunned me. Foolish? What was she talking about? I expected denial, anger, even tears. Instead she looked amused. Then Richard spoke. For the first time all evening. For God's sake, Patricia. His voice was barely above a whisper. And somehow that frightened me more than shouting. Patricia turned toward him. No. Her smile vanished. No more. The room became so quiet that I could hear rain hitting the windows. Richard lowered his head. And then something happened that nobody expected. He stood up. Slowly. Carefully. As though carrying the weight of an entire lifetime. And then he looked directly at his children. I am tired. The words landed like stones. Patricia's face twisted. Richard, no. His voice strengthened. Let me finish. Nobody interrupted. Not even Patricia. Not even Daniel. Not even the grandchildren. Because everyone suddenly sensed they were witnessing something enormous. Something decades in the making. Richard took a deep breath, then said the words that changed everything. Evelyn is right. Gasps erupted around the table. One of the daughters burst into tears. A son cursed under his breath. Daniel froze. And Patricia simply stared, like a woman watching her entire world collapse. Richard nodded slowly. I have hidden who I am for most of my life. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I married Patricia because it was expected. His voice cracked. I convinced myself I could become the man everyone wanted me to be. Tears filled his eyes. But I couldn't. 23 people sat frozen, listening, staring, trying to process what they were hearing. Then Richard looked at his wife, the woman he'd spent 42 years married to, and whispered something that shattered every heart in the room. I'm sorry. Patricia looked away. The pain on her face was unbearable. For the first time in my life, I actually felt sorry for her. Because beneath the cruelty, beneath the arrogance, beneath the control, was a woman whose marriage had been built on a lie. Then Patricia laughed again. A horrible laugh. A laugh filled with years of buried hurt. You think that's the secret? The room froze. Richard looked confused. So did everyone else, including me. Patricia slowly turned toward me, then toward the rest of the family, and smiled. A terrifying smile. Oh, my dear Evelyn, a chill crawled down my spine. You really thought that was the family secret? The room suddenly felt smaller. Dangerous. Richard's face changed. Fear appeared. Real fear. Then I remembered the expression I'd seen earlier. Not shock. Fear. Patricia hadn't been afraid of Richard's truth. She'd been afraid of something else. Something worse. Much worse. What are you talking about? Daniel asked. Patricia looked at her husband. You tell them. Richard immediately shook his head. No. Tell them. No. Tell them. Her scream shook the room. Everyone jumped. Patricia pointed at Richard. Tell our children what happened to Michael. The name hit the room like a gunshot. Michael. Nobody seemed to recognize it. Nobody except Richard. His knees nearly buckled. And suddenly I knew. Whatever Michael was, whatever Michael represented, it was the real secret. Not Richard's sexuality. Something bigger. Something darker. Patricia stepped forward. Tell them. Richard looked shattered. A broken man standing in the ruins of his own life. Then tears began rolling down his face. I can't. You can. The room waited. Every eye fixed on him. Finally, Richard whispered. Michael was my brother. Nobody spoke. He disappeared 40 years ago. I frowned. Disappeared? What did that have to do with anything? Richard swallowed. Then came the truth. The real truth. The truth that made every secret before it seem insignificant. We told everyone he ran away. Patricia nodded. That's what the family has believed for 40 years. The room looked confused. Then Patricia delivered the final blow. He didn't run away. My heart stopped. Richard closed his eyes and whispered, We paid him to disappear. The room exploded. What? Why? Paid him? Disappear? Voices erupted everywhere. Richard looked broken. Completely broken. Then he spoke. And every word carried decades of shame. Michael found out about me. The room fell silent again. He knew who I really was. Richard's hands trembled. Our father found out too. The color drained from several faces, including Patricia's. Our father was a powerful man. His voice hardened. A cruel man. Nobody interrupted. He told Michael he had two choices. Richard paused. Tears streamed down his face. Leave forever or be destroyed. The room collectively inhaled. My brother chose exile. The silence afterward was unbearable. 40 years. 40 years of lies. 40 years of pretending. 40 years of a missing brother. And now everyone knew. One daughter began sobbing. A son stared blankly into space. Daniel looked sick. But Patricia wasn't finished. She turned toward me and pointed. You! My stomach dropped. What? You exposed one secret. Her voice trembled. But tonight you've exposed all of them. The room looked at me. Not with gratitude. Not with understanding. With blame. I suddenly realized something horrible. Families don't always want the truth. Sometimes they want the lie. Because lies are comfortable. Truth changes everything. And people hate change. Especially when it hurts. Daniel stood. His face unreadable. Then he looked at me. The woman he'd promised to love forever. And said, "You need to leave." The words hit harder than any slap. What? You heard me. I stared. Waiting for him to defend me. To choose me. To stand beside me. Instead he looked away. Coward. Just like always. Patricia opened the front door herself. Rain poured outside. Cold. Relentless. Merciless. Get out. Nobody stopped her. Nobody defended me. Not one person. Not even Richard. The man whose secret I had accidentally revealed. The man I thought might understand. He simply sat there crying. Broken beneath the weight of 40 years. So I picked up my suitcase. Walked to the door. And stepped into the storm. The rain soaked me instantly. Behind me the door slammed shut. The sound echoed through the night. Final. Permanent. Cruel. I stood there for several seconds. Alone. Homeless. Rejected. Destroyed. Or so I thought. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something told me not to. I answered. Hello? A man's voice responded. Quiet. Nervous. Evelyn? Who is this? The voice hesitated. Then said 3 words that made my blood run cold. My name is Michael. I froze. The missing brother. The man who vanished 40 years ago. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Yet before I could speak, he said something that changed everything. They lied to you tonight. My heart pounded. What? A long silence followed. Then came the sentence that would haunt me forever. I wasn't paid to disappear. The rain suddenly felt ice cold. Then what happened? The man's voice broke. And when he answered, I realized the Montgomery family wasn't protecting a secret. They were protecting a crime. They tried to kill me, and then the line went dead, leaving me alone in the darkness, holding a phone, standing in the rain, and realizing that getting thrown out of that house had probably saved my life.